Hey guys, Peter, do you hear us? Hey, we had, we are streaming, yes? Everything fine? So, we had some technical issues. Unfortunately, I think this is COVID caused these problems. So, a lot of people are streaming and actually. So, sorry for this. Again, in studio is Victor, and we have a special guest.
Hi, Victor. My name is Denis. Uh,
And from other side, we have I would say CEO, the author of the book and database expert, Peter Zaitsev. Hi, Peter. How are you?
Hi, Peter.
Okay, let's start. Yes, we hear you. So let's start from the simple question. In your profile, mentioned that you are excited about technologies and you think that technologies changes and influence the people's life. Actually, why do you think so? And what positive impact on people's life you see? So basically, technology is something good but not bad. Okay, where are you from? Currently, you are living in United States. So, but yes, but where are you from? Okay, I know that you, I would say, was born with a entrepreneurship spirit, and you started your first startup in university, and later, I suppose, you started something like a Spylog or Spylog. Yes.
12 and the Soviet Union was falling apart, I figured out I could buy some books at the government fixed prices and then resell them in Moscow underground, right, for maybe 10 extra profit. Right, that was my first, entrepreneurship of way of making money. It was very, very small, right? And the second turning point for me was when I figured out what it really goes much better if you can use other people labor, right? I remember I reached out to one of the Taiwanese computer producers and tell them, oh, you know what, your products are so popular in Russia, but you don't have a Russian website, right? And ask if they want some help translating that. They did, and they paid, I think, like $2,000, which was like enormous money at that time. And then instead of doing that myself, I hired a student from like some linguistic university, paid him 500 to have the rest, right? And say, yeah, that is, fantastic. And then we set things up so he would be doing that every month, and I will just keep a bulk of money for basically making a sale, right? So that's I think another interesting thing how things work.
Okay. Okay, but what about your first company, Spylog? I remember the Spylog was very popular.
Yes, Spylog, right? It's so funny how this name sounds in Russian. Russians, Spylog. Here, were you crazy to name a company that way? Obviously at a different time, right? And we didn't live in Russia. You kind of didn't know or couldn't care less what Americans would think about the name, and we thought that was kind of really interesting, kind of fun and interesting. Yes, and Spylog, I was a co-founder on that and the CTO. That is something we started when I was, I think, second or third year in Moscow State University, right? And that's something I was involved for a bunch of years until, unfortunately, the dot-com crash happened. It affected the United States, of course, but it's affected affected Russia, I think, even more, because all those Americans which were in late 90s coming to Russia and kind of invested, they just packed up and leave, right? And you couldn't even come and beg for more money because they were all gone. So Spylog was impacted, right? It didn't die, and actually it was sold 2 years later. But the original founders, like myself, were not involved with that company. It's later at a later time, and that is where I thought about moving outside of Russia, right, and doing something else.
Okay, you was an entrepreneur in Russia, but when you moved to United States, you changed your life, I would say, to engineering. Why you decided to move from entrepreneurship to engineering?
Look, right then. In Spylog, I was CTO and shareholder, right? In this case, but I still did a lot of technical work, right? In fact, all the kind of like a sales and business and marketing side, that was somebody else's responsibility. Right. So that was very, very close to me, right? And then it was the time to leave the Spylog, right? It's wasn't the time for me to start something else, right? I thought about getting more experience, and in particular outside of Russia. And I think that was really good for me. Very, the important learning experience. I joined at that time a company called MySQL AB, right? The company behind MySQL. Then I think I was like employee number 45 or something, right? So that was a pretty small company at that time. I started working remotely in Russia, but then in a couple of years I moved to United States and continue working for MySQL AB for about 2 more years. At that time, it was getting larger and larger, and like as the companies get larger, often your responsibilities tend to shrink, right? And I started to feel myself like a little cog in an enterprise machine, which really wasn't for me. So I thought, hey, you know what? Probably time to go and do something else, right? And that is where idea of Percona came, right?
Okay.
So yeah, and I think an interesting thing about that is also maybe interesting and relevant for some folks in US, right, or considering that path. It was actually very hard to start the company as entrepreneur and remain in United States, right, because of all that like stupid immigration laws, right? So I had to move, where I moved to United Kingdom and started Percona in London originally, right? Which at that time had more friendly immigration rules.
Okay. Thank you.
That was very interesting. So, Peter, I'm more technical person, and I would like to ask you some technical questions, which I'm really interested in. Right now,
Of
you're
course,
running
of course.
big company Percona, and you are doing technical sessions. I saw your sessions; they are pretty good. They have pretty good content, and I'm really interested in how you keep your technical expertise growing in this condition, when you need to run the company, do your job as a CEO, and where do you take time for this?
Well, yeah, I think that is a challenge, right? And in my opinion, I made a decision what why I am the CEO. I want to remain understanding technology and maintaining at least some of my technical jobs, right? I am not as good with MySQL or MongoDB or Postgres, right, as I was, right, but I still was when I was like serving customers and every week, right? But I still find a lot of time to read an articles, spend some time hands-on, right? For example, most Friday I try to keep it with no meetings, right? So I can really deep dive and focus on doing something technical, getting my hands dirty. The other thing I think is very important is building their executive management team, right? Which really understand who you are, understands your strong and weak sides, and complements you in a way, and also trusting that team to do things appropriately, right? So I think compared to maybe some other CEOs which you'll find in industry, I am less involved in the sales process, right, or some others, but I'm more involved in technology or community. Well, that's because who I am, right? And I think what was very interesting for me when I started on my path, I was comparing myself, for example, to Martin Mikas, who is CEO of MySQL, or some other successful entrepreneurs, right? And you know what? In certain cases, I saw myself kind of very unfavorably, right? I'm not so polished as Martin, for example, and never would be, right? Or I'm not so organized as some other people, and so on and so forth. But then, as you look at that, you see, well, that is not really helpful, right? You need to find your own path. As entrepreneur, you have this fantastic ability to really build a team around you which is right for you, right? And it probably would not be right for somebody else, right? And I think that is one of the reasons that I like entrepreneurship compared to kind of more working for corporation, right? Because In corporation, often you join and there is, let's say, some expectations of positions, right? You have to fit in that box because there are many similar boxes in the organization, right? And you don't have as much choice to, to define your own position, right? As we do as entrepreneurs.
Thank you. That's very, very interesting.
And hey, there is also, I see, a question from audience from Bruce. Wow, I'm impressed with Bruce Nomjan is joining in. If that's not somebody who's impersonating, right? And I know some folks who may not know that Bruce is one of the foremost experts in PostgreSQL space. So that's very cool. And he's asking why I left MySQL. All right, and for me, I think that's kind of two items. In this case, one I was saying about their being the cog in the machine, but another is what the culture of a MySQL was changing. When I joined MySQL, we were a very romantic company, right? It was about, hey, you know what, open source, revolutionize the world, unseat Oracle, right, make a difference. And then I remember MySQL went through one and then second venture round, and then the CEO changed his tune and said, well, you know what? Our first and foremost obligation is to make as much money to our shareholders, right? And to achieve that growth, right, we are going to do anything, right? And that was impacting how approach to customers happens, right? Instead of doing what's right for customers, we were encouraged on the technical team to really, bend the truth, right? Or, do certain cases to, to sell a thing which doesn't fit, right? And that was, that's something I didn't like at all, right? And I found myself thinking in my mind no more as we, MySQL, but thinking as they, because I kind of wanted to distance myself from that stuff which is going on, right? And for me, that was important, I think, mind shift. And so that is a time to leave, right? You cannot really be mentally thinking what you are the part of a team, right? About us as a company, then that's probably the time you should be away.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of people in the community are really excited. We're really excited about Oracle buying MySQL. What do you think about this? Did MySQL become better after this or no?
Well, I think this is very interesting, right? First, just to state the record straight, right? Oracle didn't buy MySQL. Oracle bought Sun, and Sun, a couple of years before, bought MySQL. But in any case, that was a complete shock for the MySQL team, right? Because we were kind of raised in the early company days for the Oracle is an enemy number one, right? We were out there to get Oracle, maybe not to kill Oracle, right? But at least to hurt it badly. And now you are kind of being, swallowed by that company, right? Many people sort of, let's say, left at that time. There was a lot of concerns in community, right? There was even, a bunch of lawsuits and so on and so forth, right? But if you look at that 10 years later, I can say what the Oracle was actually pretty good steward of MySQL, right? I think we expected a lot worse, right? MySQL is still open source, right? At least MySQL Community Edition. Oracle has been investing in engineering, right, a lot. They also really invested a lot in the quality of MySQL, which I would say improved compared to MySQL early days, right? And certain things which maybe they're kind of Oracle is not doing, it's not implementing some of the Oracle comparability features in MySQL, right? But at the same time, for majority of MySQL users, that is not what they really want, right? If you ask big MySQL users, like Facebook and so on, do they need Oracle comparability features? No, they don't. They don't need MySQL to be crappy Oracle. They need MySQL to be better MySQL. And that is what the MySQL has been coming as a part of the Oracle.
Okay, Peter, you started talking about the open source. I think it's a pretty interesting topic. A lot of people talking about an open source. It's I think it's great. In the same time, I heard very I would say frustrating opinion, for example, about the MongoDB, which is also open source. People say, okay, it's open source, you can download, you can try to install it, but finally, if you would like things running and you would like to get some value, you definitely need to hire an expert. So basically, it's free, you can use it, but in the same time, you can't. What do you think about this approach?
So, so let me clarify, right? So, if you look at the MongoDB, they have been open source, right? Company right now they have shifted to what's called the source available, right? Which is not really the license which gives you all the freedoms, which are linked to open source software, but you can still see the source code, right, and maybe use it for free in some circumstances, right? I think MongoDB was always what I would call like a very reluctant open source company, right? They put one of the I would say more restrictive open source license, AGPL, in their early days, right? They also did not really have a lot of governance, right? When you work with your community to figure out what features you want to be, right, or encourage and accepting contributions. Like you would actually hear the MongoDB CEO talking about, hey, you know what, we did not open source MongoDB for help, right? We did that to basically as a marketing ploy to get more adoption, right? So I think the MongoDB in general is this kind of on the one side of the open source, right, and the war side, right. On the other side, I would, in the database space, I would put Postgres, which has really large ecosystem with many companies, really decision taken in some sort of community way, and so on and so forth, right. But speaking about experts, right? I mean, it's good to recognize that any open source, right, even if it's Postgres, it's not free for the enterprise, right? If you are yourself building, let's say, some small project, you may choose to use open source software for free, and you spend your own time, right? For the company, for the large company, the choice is always, well, either you're paying for software or you're paying for time, right? Wherever you hire somebody in-house or hire external experts like Percona, right, to help you, it still costs something. Why open source is wonderful is because it gives you the choice, right? For example, if I run Oracle, I cannot hire somebody to, write a feature which I want in Oracle, right? Or provide this kind of a fix or annoying bug. It only is reserved for Oracle Corporation for ransom-like prices, right? In MySQL, Postgres, you have a choice. You can go to a vendor, you can hire a third party, you can do it yourself. And I think that is, very important difference.
Is it so valuable as you say? Actually, can you give me a, let's say, simple example when somebody would like some additional features to the database and they're going to contact vendor and asking to implement something? I think it's very technical point.
Well, I mean, if you look in this case, it depends on what kind of company you are, right? Like if you look at like one of the largest known MySQL users, Facebook, right? They for years have been contributing and developing their own MySQL source tree. Why? Because on the Facebook scale, even if you achieve just 5% efficiency, right? This is tens of millions of dollars a year savings, right? So that makes sense, much more when it's kind of on the small scale, right? And that is what happened. You can also see a lot of improvement coming to MySQL from third parties like Alibaba, Tencent, and others. Again, those are kind of large vendors for them, which are kind of very meaningful, right? I know for some features we also implemented for folks at Percona, right, which often maybe some like a smaller features, but which are important, for folks, some optimizations and so on and so forth.
Okay, thank you. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, MongoDB and NoSQL databases is a pretty interesting topic, and I really wonder about your consulting services about this. For example, if some enterprise will hire Percona and ask you, hey, we have our transactional system. We know that MongoDB now supports transaction and have transaction log. Can we throw out Oracle and bring Mongo here?
Well, where MongoDB folks may tell you, yes, of course, right? I'm not going to tell you that. The answer in this case is often much more nuanced, right? In terms of, hey, is it possible? Then B, does it really make sense, right? Because often, right, there is a difference between what is possible and what is actually the best choice, right? And their MongoDB NoSQL approach, it has a lot of benefits for certain workloads, right? For others, relational databases can be still much better choice, right? And I think this is kind of very interesting to see this kind of migration continuing going in both ways, right? I hear about both people saying, well, you know what, we have been fed up with trying to scale MySQL, Postgres, right? Or, oh my gosh, SQL is just so complicated, right? We go to Mongo, it's much easier, it's web scale, right? And all this kind of stuff. And at the same time say, well, you know what, people, now we are finding a hard time to, let's say, maintain our application over long term, right? In this kind of complete schemaless world, right? We want maybe take that to more relational space, right? So it goes back and forth, right? And our approach at Percona is we want to really understand what the application is, what requirements are, and then to recommend what's right choice in our opinion.
Thank you. Do you think MongoDB is ready for enterprise right now? And what can be the type of project which can benefit from MongoDB?
Well, I mean, this is again kind of like a nuanced question, right? If you compare MongoDB to Oracle, right, I'm sure there would be some features which MongoDB doesn't have, right? At the same time, there have been a huge amount of enterprises, large enterprises, which have been successful using MongoDB for certain cases. Like for example, one of a very interesting use case which MongoDB got a lot of traction early on was this kind of like a 360 customer view, right? Like you have some information about your customers in Salesforce, some maybe in kind of a bunch of other internal system. You can sort of dump all that information to MongoDB, right? And then you can easily pull out all that data in the single system, right? A lot of enterprises need that because a lot of them, have large amount of very kind of not very well connected systems, right? And that is where MongoDB has been, perfect fit as example.
Okay, Peter, that's a tricky question. I know that in community, Percona has very good reputation, but in the same time, I heard the opinion that some enterprises, actually, I would say vendors, just say I hate Percona because they could do the same job as we do, but for the bill twice lower, and actually they are giving the business away from us.
Well, it is. Well, I'm not sure like why I would say that is a tricky question, right? Well, this is obviously I would say by design, right? If you are a successful disruptor, then chances are you will be loved by your customers and hated by your competition, right? What else? What else would you expect, right? I mean, our goal at Percona is we're very focused on doing the right things for our customers, for our community, right? For open source projects we support, right? And yes, that is going to hurt some other entities. Well, that's such as life.
Okay, what kind of relations you have with MySQL? They are good, they are bad, or just
Well, I
neutral?
mean, like in this case, if you look at the MySQL team at Oracle, right, I think we have a very mature, good relationship, right? And that can be defined as competition, right? Like sort of like a mix between cooperation and competition, right? If you ever heard that term. So we work together with development team in MySQL Fair community team, right? Really to promote MySQL. We are both interested in making MySQL better open source database. At the same time, when it comes to sales, that is when we compete substantially, right? I mean, obviously, our salespeople and their salespeople they don't don't like each other too much because hey, you know what? There is customers to compete with, and there is going to be winners and losers, right?
Okay, let's say that Oracle have already bought indirectly, but okay, MySQL. So, do we have an independent of Microsoft with MS SQL? From other side, we have Oracle holds MySQL. Actually, I don't remember the situation with Postgre, but is it owned by Oracle also?
No.
No. So
Postgres
actually,
is
okay, we
large.
have three vendors. Two of them are very big. They actually are not limited with any resources. I would say Oracle and Microsoft, and we have Postgre. Do you think we should expect a new vendor, independent vendor, on the market?
Well, so the first thing I would say, right, is what even if you look at the MySQL as a kind of a market, right, it's much more diverse and complicated. Yes, of course, there is MySQL and Oracle, right, which have both open source and proprietary version of MySQL. Let's say some of the MySQL extensions are proprietary, right? Then there is AWS, Amazon, who I believe makes more money on MySQL than Oracle, right? Which they have their own proprietary Amazon Aurora, right, version. Google, Microsoft, they also have their own versions, right? All the Chinese clouds do, right, and so on and so forth, right? So there is a lot of those kind of vendors in that space, right? Which in many cases can provide what you're looking as a customer. Because if I am going and I'm using MySQL on Amazon, they provide for me the complete set of services, right? If it crashes, they are on hook to resolve that issue for me, right? Not Oracle, right? So that is kind of one thing which is interesting, right? The other thing which is interesting is besides Percona, right? There is also MariaDB to be noticed, right? Which has a fork, right? And it's kind of somewhat compatible MySQL technology, right? Now there are also technologies such as TiDB, right? That is, completely greenfield development of distributed MySQL compatible, right, with some limitations to the database, right? So you can see even MySQL market is kind of not as, hey, there is Oracle and it can do whatever it wants with MySQL and, kind of just screw everybody over, right? There is a lot of vendors with a lot of money time to MySQL, which are not going to let that happen. Because remember, right, when the people speak about Oracle can kill MySQL, Oracle can make MySQL closed source. Yes, they can, but that only applies to the new versions. The old stuff, which was already GPL, it can't become closed source, right? And then I think it also in open source, there is a lot of open source database coming up to the market. They may be just not as popular, right, as MySQL and Postgres those days, right? You can think about things like CockroachDB, Yugabyte, right, or for like special purpose relational database such as ClickHouse, right? There is a lot of cool stuff going on in the market right now.
Okay, thank you.
I have this question. So we have proprietary databases like Oracle and MySQL on one side. On another side, we have open source, Postgres and MySQL. And when you start a new project, you often do this choice between these two and these two. And really, the price is a very important point here. But if we cut off the price, will there be any benefit of Postgres and MySQL over Oracle and MySQL? What do you think about this?
Oh yes, of course. Of course. So if you think about that, right? First, I think what they're developers who are skilled, right? They especially prefer open source because of its their ability to really understand that much better than you ever could with proprietary database, right? Because hey, if you're writing a program and Postgres doesn't act as expected, you can always take a look at the source code. With Oracle, Microsoft SQL Server, well, guess what? You may be able to talk to support, and most likely those guys wouldn't know, much better than you, right? Because considered who works at first level support of those organizations, right? So that is one thing. The second thing I think is very important. This community, the ecosystem around the open source tools, it's much more supportive, right? There are, like, if you think about Postgres, right, there are so many people who are passionate about you being successful with Postgres, right? So you can get help, right, to much more, I think, extent than you can get it from Oracle or Microsoft, right, in this regard. And what was interesting for me, if you look at Stack Overflow, right, they did this kind of developer survey about the databases, right? Almost all of the preferences what developers would choose their open source databases, right? The Microsoft SQL was kind of out there, but considering the Stack Overflow was also kind of Microsoft Stack biased, right? It's not surprising.
Thank you.
Okay. Uh, Peter, I know that you are the author of several books. I also know that write the books, it's not an easy job, and it's not, I would say, paid good enough. So, what was the reason for you to jump into the writing the books? I would say several times.
Well, I was one of the authors of High Performance MySQL, right books, the 2 editions we did, right? And indeed, that takes a lot of time and effort. I think for us, that book was very helpful for Percona, right? In terms of, hey, getting us on the market, getting us more recognized. We have, hey, company founders, authors of one of the more authority books on the subjects. And I would say for this kind of hacks, right, for technology entrepreneurship, writing a book is a very good one, right? Because frankly, even if a book is crap, it looks very good on a resume. It looks good on the website, saying like, "Oh, we wrote a book. We are authority on the subject."
So you actually can make money from a book, but with a bit different
Well,
approach.
look, the majority of technology books, not really, right? There maybe like a small sliver which do that, right? But like a lot of other offers I know, right? Typically, it's either to help a consulting practice, right, or some other company, right, or they just like to write, right, and that's the kind of gift to the universe, right? But typically, if you are the great expert in our space, you can make more money by working even as a consultant, right, or as some of the successful companies.
Quite honest answer. It's just marketing, I would say. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
There is nothing wrong with honest marketing.
No, nothing wrong, but in most cases, people saying I would like to share knowledge, to give something for free for community and things like that. In the same time, you are honestly saying that it's just the marketing and you are not making money on books. I appreciate
Oh,
this.
look, I would say it is both, right? And I think this is kind of the thing which drives, in my opinion, the entrepreneurship, right? It really helps to motivate you, especially on your kind of bad days, right? If there is something bigger out there than just making money, right? I mean, I am really passionate about the open source and technology, right? And that is one of the reasons why I do what I do, right? But at the same time, Percona is a business, and well, you can say what I do that for money as well, right? And I don't think you should simplify that to either or, right? I mean, right? In this case, it's better when you have more than one motivation.
Okay, let's try to talk about the Percona. Actually, who invented the name Percona? Is there
Oh, you don't know the story?
any tricks
Percona.
about the name Percona?
Well, there was this guy, a relative of mine, Francesco Percona from Italy, right? And I named the company for him.
Okay, are you as
That's not bullshit, actually.
okay?
Yeah, that is what I take to some annoying people, right? No, there is no Italian in my blood, unfortunately, maybe. In reality, is Percona stands for Performance Consultants. That is what was original sort of business of Percona. And I added A just because percon.com domain was already busy, right? So that's all there is.
Okay, are you a sole owner of the company or you have co-founders?
No, so we started company with my co-founder and now CTO Vadim Tkachenko, right, who was working with me at MySQL ABE before that, right, and we are the majority shareholders of Percona. Plus, the rest of the company is owned by our current and past staff, right? We believe in kind of sharing the wealth, right, and everybody who joins Percona gets kind of a small part of equity in the company. But we don't have any VCs, right? And so there is no kind of institutional or other external money in the company.
Okay, Percona today is, I would say, big company. If I'm not mistaken, you have more than 200 people over the world.
Mm-hmm.
Actually,
yeah, about 250.
Okay, you reached this point by natural growth, or you invited investors to put some money into Percona to grow, things like that?
Well, no. So after I left MySQL, right, I think I had this sort of PTSD, right, regarding investors. Like I saw what for MySQL, they really changed the company culture in a negative way, right? And I didn't want for that to happen in Percona. So either, despite many kind of offerings, right, I never took any venture capital, right, or later private equity capital. We were always growing with premise what best money is customer money, right? So hey, you know what? You need more money, sell more. You want to sell more, keep your customers happy, right? That's how we grew.
Okay.
I have a question also about the Percona. You have your own products for monitoring, for other purposes. What are your next plans? Which products are you going to develop in the future?
Well, I would say a lot of our work right now in furthering and improving those things, right? If you think about our vision, what Percona is, right? We are looking to provide you the software platform and the services which come with them to really run the open source database we support in the best way possible, right? So that is the grand vision. That requires obviously things like monitoring management. That requires core database software. That also requires various things for deployment and so on and so forth, right? Really, we believe what the big opportunity right now when open source is not quite there yet is democratizing their database as a service market, right? Because if you think from a developer standpoint, their database as a service is so good, so convenient as a way to use a database, right? I don't have to think about installing all the different components, making sure what my backup was adding to cron, right, and all this kind of stuff, right? I can just, get an API and I have it, instance which manages backups, have ability patched automatically, and so on and so forth, right? That is fantastic. But right now, if that's what you want, your choice is go into commercial software and experience lock-in with one of those cloud vendors. And we believe what we can do better, and we are working at Percona in building the software to provide that database as a service experience, right? But as a completely open source solution, avoiding that that lock-in.
Yeah, that's very, very interesting. And in such kind of product, let me think a bit about this. But probably you will need some storage, yes, for the data. Which database engine will you choose for this?
Well, look, if you think about database as a service, right? People want to use what they want to use, right? I mean, people come in and say, hey, I want to run Postgres as a database as a service, or MySQL, or Mongo, right? So in our case, we are looking to offer all of them, right? And let's the developers to choose what they believe is right. Use our advice if you want that advice, or decide on their own if that's what they choose. We are building all of that on a Kubernetes platform, which I think is a fantastic ways right now to build solutions like that, because all vendors support Kubernetes, right? All the big clouds, VMware, Red Hat, right? It's universal API now, which really allows you to save off a lot of development costs, right? And it also has, good storage abstraction layer, which allows you to integrate with different kind of, storage vendors, right? That's what we are looking for. If you look at specific kind of cloud optimized storage in Percona server for MySQL, we support a storage engine called MyRogs, right? Or which is based on RogsDB. That is what Facebook built for their workloads, right? And I think it has some properties which make it a very good to be used in the cloud, right? And that is one of the unique value adds what we are looking to support in our solution.
Look, you are talking about the database as a service. Actually, today everything could be as a service. But in the same time, what do you think about the security side of this approach? It's quite clear that vendor of the cloud has the full access to your data, and he could even promise you that it's encrypted, even give you some ideas how it's encrypted and things like that. But actually, it's very hard to check. I understand this is not a simple question, but in the same time, I would say it's important.
Yeah, totally. Well, and I think that is what makes open source the database as a service even more important. Because if you are running on something, Amazon Aurora, right, for example, you can't look inside, what goes in the sausage, right? Who actually has access to your data, how it's actually encrypted, right? You have to trust some statements, audits maybe, right, and whatever, right? Now, with the open source, first, you have a choice of running that on-prem on your own environment, right? You can install your own Kubernetes cluster, which you control completely and run on it, right? In this case, and even if you are running that in the cloud, right, you have much more ability to look inside and customize your system to make sure the security auditing, right, or whatever is in place if you choose so. Right, and I think that is a good point, right? While we often, when we talk about database as a service alone, we think about this, public database service as run by hyperscalers like Amazon. But when I speak about database as a service, I think about the user experience. Hey, I have an API call, my instance, or a GUI, my instance goes up and it kind of self-manages, self-heals, self-patches, right? It doesn't require hyperscaler to be able to provide that kind of experience.
Okay, I will try to make some generalization about the open source, I would say. I heard a lot of opinions about open source. Actually, everybody say it's good. But from my perspective, the most important point regarding the open source is the ability to check and clarify the security and actually prove that something actually promised actually works and you can check it. So I suppose that the most and really most valuable part of the open source is the security. Because, for example, when you're using something as a service, we are using a lot of things. You never know how your data is managed. You read the some of the security policies and things like that. What do you think? Is security is really most important point of the open source, or we have anything as much as important as security?
Well, you're trying kind of to simplify, right? Obviously, a more
Yes.
complicated subject, right? I think different people value in open source different ways, right? There are some people, and you're probably one of them, right, who are much more security conscious, right? Than there are other ones, right? While in theory, open source really allows you to examine, right, what it does, right, and so on and so forth, right? In practice, you would see what many people using open source, right? They don't really have a skills, or desire to do that, right? And that is not the main driving factor for them to use open source, right? At the grand scheme of things, right? I think especially if you look at like a geopolitical aspects, that is very important, right? Because if Oracle kind of ships you a database, right, or whatever, which is like a big binary sausage, then it's very hard to understand what it is, right? If you're using the open source software, you can always choose to make your own builds. You can audit the source code, right? And so on and so forth, which is extremely important in those more sensitive environments.
Okay, thank you.
Peter, what do you think about the future of relational and NoSQL databases? Is NoSQL already took its own piece of market, or it will grow?
Well, I think we have like a lot of interesting things going on in the market right now, right? From one standpoint, we have a lot of databases which are kind of specially purpose built coming to the market, right? And NoSQL is not like one thing, right? It's kind of huge series, right? If you think about like what Redis has to offer, or Cassandra, or MongoDB, right? All of them really offer you different approaches, right? Then there are time series databases, graph databases, right? And so on and so forth, right? And there is so much innovation going on out there with all those kind of different approaches, how you can deal with that data. Some database technologies are very kind of specialized in one approach, but then there is also other technologies such as DB, right, which is multimodal, where you can really use different ways to access the data in database. Actually, even the MySQL turning into being more multimodal, right, with MySQL doc store, providing you kind of MongoDB-like NoSQL interface, right? On the other side, you would see what relational databases, right? They are getting more and more advanced features, right? For example, JSON has very good support now in MySQL, in Postgres, right? Even in SQLite, right? Which I think was inspired in a lot of cases of success of technologies like MongoDB, right? And so that's kind of always a question. Hey, what should we do, right? Should we use more database which are kind of purpose built for a problem, right? Or should we use smaller number of databases to avoid having like too much complexity and kind of a zoo, right? And we see different organizations making their own choices, right? In this case, so it's not like everybody is choosing one route, and I think that's a good thing.
Okay. Let's try to back to your company, Percona. I would say it's not an unusual company where I wanted to say that everybody sitting in the office, but today nobody actually sitting in the office. So I would say, why you choose remote only approach for your company?
So that is a good question, right? First, both me and Vadim, my co-founder, came from MySQL, which was a remote company, right? So we knew how things operate this way. And we also were in a different locations ourselves, right? I mean, when Percona was started, I was in London, Vadim was in Kiev, right? So naturally, we started working working remotely, and the first people we hired were in a kind of a different places, right? So that is just how it's developed, and we learn to work with the benefits and drawbacks what this kind of distributed workforce provides, right? I think it's in particular valuable for the companies like Percona who work in open source space, because if you look at the people who are working with open source projects like Linux, Postgres, right? They typically can be from anywhere in the world, right? Because everybody can understand and contribute to that Linux, to that code, right? Or even at least like use it without paying anything, right? And that really means what it's very feasible, right, to hire people worldwide, their best talent comes. I would say there is a lot of this kind of interesting thing, which I tell everybody who joins Percona, hey, you know what? There is actually a difference between maybe the company which was office company, let's say in San Francisco, and now everybody is working from home, from San Francisco, maybe moved around a little bit, right? Compare that to a company where we have many countries. English is not native for majority of the people, even for that as a company language. We have from so many kind of different cultures, backgrounds, and expectations. Time zone is also the thing, right? Because we do not, we have a lot of our teams which are mixed, right? You can have some software engineers, for example, in one time zone, others in other, right? And that really influence a lot of culture, a lot of processes, and so on and so forth, which is frankly not for everyone.
Okay. A lot of people talking about working remotely, talking about cons and pros, advantages and disadvantages. I know that Percona more than a decade on the market, and you probably have a really huge experience in remote and managing remote teams. You just mentioned the one very important, I would say two very important things. Among advantages, its ability to hire the best talents. You actually hiring all over the world, it's clear. Among the biggest disadvantages, you mentioned the time zones. It's also quite clear. Can you enumerate, I would say, two more most important advantages and disadvantages in remote work, and how you manage to deal with this?
Yes, well, and I would say, nothing in this case. I think it comes as an, black and white, like advantage and disadvantage, right? For example, in one sense, different time zones is problematic. In other cases, that actually is helpful because there is always many people online. In our line of business, 24/7 customer support. That is, that is very helpful, right? In this case, so I would say that is what we look at. I would say I mentioned as a concern, right, is a communication in a different language, right, and mixing of those kind of diversity, different cultures, right, that can introduce more friction. It can be slower, but also in many cases that made kind of you take kind of a better decisions because you understand perspective from different angles, right? Maybe even take a better decisions because, well, you have that requirement to sort of like a slow down and maybe write things down, right? So I think, in my opinion, right, both office approach like a remote only, it can work, right? You just need to hire the right people which can be successful in that kind of environment. right? For example, like one thing which we learned, you have to really have people who are self-managed, right? Because in office, there is always that kind of a peer pressure, right? You cannot just watch cat videos on YouTube all the day, right? The people are passing by, right? It wouldn't be convenient. If you work remotely, you actually can, right? Of course, you wouldn't keep your job for a very long time, right? But you can really get in that situation. If you don't have that self-motivation, right, and self-discipline, remote work is probably not right for you, right? There are some others like this, with the qualities which are, I think, very important for remote work, which may not be as critical in the office work. And vice versa applies, right? I think some people who are extremely social, right, they really need that kind of, like a human touch and kind of really hugs and kisses around the cooler, right? They may find it's very lonely to work remote.
Okay, I heard that you interview each people you are hiring to the Percona. That's true?
Yes. For majority of people, I do the final interview. And the reason for that, what I look, is kind of twofold. Like one way is I actually do it kind of in reverse. I encourage people to ask them the questions, right, about Percona. I tell them I want to make sure what they join Percona with open eyes. Percona is not for everyone. I believe that we're a great company. Many of our staff members would, say what that is the best company they ever worked for, but it's not for everyone, right? And I just want to make sure that everybody joined us had an opportunity to talk to CEO, ask them all the questions they found relevant for them, and get their honest answer. The second thing from my side is I'm very big on the culture, right? While a lot of the people in my staff are much better in technical assessment, right, skills, especially in the areas I don't have a lot of experience in, right? I think that is ultimately my responsibility to ensure the company culture is moving in a positive direction, right? And that is what I really kind of screen people for.
Okay, I would say a lot of modern companies using some kind of frameworks to hire people. For example, I know that People AI, it's a company a lot of people invested in. It's growing, and they are using some kind of framework with some questionnaires and things like that. Actually, how do you hire the right people, and how you can make the final decision? Is this person really fits Percona or not? It's obvious that a lot of people just lying on the interviews.
Well, yes, people do, right? And frankly, if you look at, there is a lot of a process, what question to ask, how we evaluate, going through a process, right? And this kind of a lot of a science, which our team has, right? Frankly, by the time it gets to me, it is more about the art, right? It's about, hey, them and me to see if we can establish that, personal connection. Do we like each other, right? Frankly, in this case, because I think that's miserable to work for a company, right, the CEO of which you don't like, right? In this case, right? And I have to trust my gut how that person fits or doesn't in Percona. I think another important thing here is this, right? Is sharing responsibility, right? Because in our case, I cannot really blame anybody in Percona for making a bad hire decision because I was a part of it, right? And I think that is good to share responsibility in something so important as hiring your team.
You just mentioned it, that it's probably not a good idea to work with for the company when you dislike the CEO. I know that Steve Jobs was hated by a lot of people, and they say he was a very complicated person to work with. In the same time, people said yes, he was the person very hard to work with, but he was very demanded, and actually we achieved the greatest results we ever had. What do you think about this?
Totally right. Well, I mean, I think there is a lot of truth to that, right? But I think in this case, right, there is like saying, hey, you know what, he is a person which is always kind of warm and cuddly, and liking the person is the different things, right? You can actually like people which can be assholes sometimes, right? I mean, if you think about that, you probably can remember people, hey, you know what, they assholes sometimes, but I like them, right? And I know what I can be assholes, right? That's one of the things I'm explaining to people, saying, hey, you know what, actually, I don't have a very, I'm not very balanced, right? I tell people, you know what, sometimes you will see Peter turning into Hulk, right? That's a word as used, right? Because sometimes you get to piss me off, and I am not going to be very, gentle about that, right? In this case, and I'm open about that. Like in certain cases, I'm also working maybe on controlling my anger better. That is kind of a growth potential for me, right?
So actually, correct me if I'm wrong. On the interview, you could say to the candidate that you could be angry, that you could be completely unpolite, you could be completely crazy. If it's possible, you can even hit the person. But
No,
taking
no, no. I
into
mean,
account that
I
company
don't.
is remote, you just
No. Like this is something which is, yeah, it's interesting, right? You read some stories of Silicon Valley, like for example in early days Cisco, people will deck each other right to the floor, right? I am not a violent person, but I am passionate, right? And that passion may be, how can you do such a stupid thing, right? Or something like that.
so to
Right?
think it's
No, but
Percona.
I don't hit people, but I can be unpleasant.
Okay, a lot of people accept this.
Well, yes, I think they do. Right? In this case, I think what is important is about the opening up, right? About your challenges, right? Because I think if you really look at that, is nobody is perfect, right? There are only people who pretend to be perfect, and there are people who are honest about being imperfect, right? And I would encourage doing that myself. I would encourage my staff to do more of that as well, because you know what? The more we know about each other imperfections, the better we can work together as a team. The more we pretend to be, professional, perfect, right? The more things become unsaid, hidden, and nothing good comes out of that.
Okay, quite honest. Thank you.
I wonder a bit about the actual responses from the people. Like, what were they saying? Like, I'm fine, double my salary and I will be fine, or that's not for me.
Well, I mean, some fact comes in not, not for me. I don't think that's as often, right? Because you mentioned, look, I mean, if you look at many startup world, it is not startup which is kind of full of very nice people, right? Like you mentioned, famous Steve Jobs, right? Or you can find some other, people like Elon Musk, right? Wherever you can probably find a lot of, not very, not always very polite behavior out there, right? I think what I hear mostly is from people is kind of an interesting, right? They're saying, well, you know what? You tell all those things, people, but you know what? Actually, you are not the worst CEO I worked for. There was this kind of other guy, he would do X, Y, and Z, right? In this case, I hear that probably more than the opposite.
Thank you. That was fair enough. And I personally would like to hear this information on the interview. So that will be good.
To know that information beforehand. Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
Because you signed the
Before I
offer.
will join the company.
Actually, yes. Actually, if you are going to join Percona, you already have experience with the CIO, and now we know this guy. Actually, he could be angry and could be completely unpolite. Okay, now we know Peter.
Да, учусь.
Actually, I really appreciate it. It's really quite honest because of I would say a lot of people trying to be like a nice cats. They saying, okay, I'm good. It's nice company to work with, but you honestly say that Percona it's not for all, and you should feed the culture and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think still, right, with all of that, Percona is a very, good company to work for. I think you have a very strong team, very strong relationship in the team. Like one of the quotes I heard recently was very interesting to me, saying, "Hey, you know what? I came in Percona remote, right, and I built better relationship for my 3 months here than I got, after 2 years working in the same office for in some other company, right?" And I think that comes to a lot of that. Again, I think our authenticity, right, and really encouraging people to be honest with each other, to respect what they're different, kind of multicultural, right, and kind of fun and laugh at some at somebody having the challenges, right, or needs which in particular region of the world, right.
Okay, let me provocate you a little bit. You are trying to say that Percona it's a good company, and when it comes to the culture, if you feel the culture, you should actually enjoy communication with Peter. You should enjoy the company, things like that. What about the people turnover in your company? How actually the average time or the duration the people are working in Percona? Months, years?
Well, it is many years, right? We are actually quite good compared to the tech space, but I think it's also when you speak about the turnover, right? It's good to understand the reasons, right, and what happened to the people later, right? In this case, because you can say, "Oh my gosh, I hated this company so much, I moved up to the lower level position for a lower pay just to escape that," right? That's almost never happens at Percona, right? Typically, we look at two things. One is we do have a strong performance culture, and frankly, not everybody is cut to be successful at Percona, right? In this case, well, we part ways, right? And I think in this case that is good because some companies chasing that kind of low turnover, they may accept mediocrity, which is not a good thing. Also, Percona is a very good name, so we do have many tech companies trying more than Percona can provide, right? And I am proud what we can help our staff in this career, right? in this case, in this kind of upward movement and career opportunities. And now we have Perconians working in many successful companies in Silicon Valley and worldwide, and having very senior role in our industry.
Okay, thank you.
Peter, I have a question a little beyond your CEO responsibility. You said that you keep your technical expertise at a high level, you keep growing it. What are the areas of your interest right now? Which things do you want to investigate, to look at, to try something new?
Well, I think if you look at the databases and this kind of and the Kubernetes space, that is always exciting. There is a lot of new evolving stuff out there. The other thing is artificial intelligence, machine learning, and how we can use that for database performance tuning, stuff like that. That is another area of my interest. I am in generally very also involved in observability a lot, right? Really, how we get insights about what's going on in database and so on and so forth, right? And that is kind of not maybe kind of super rational sometimes, but it's, I don't know, for some reason that is something which is, just interesting for me, right? And I've been spending a fair amount of time in that space.
Thank you.
Peter, what do you think about the COVID? Have you felt the impact, probably a reduce of the revenue, problems with the customers, and actually how is your company is living in the new reality?
Well, yeah, COVID sucks, right? What do you want to do? Obviously, right? First, I would say what the COVID is really impacting the lives of our staff, right? In this case, and even if you are remote, it's quite a difference with being remote and being remote when your children can't go to school, right? Or when you have to, take care about your kind of elderly parents because you want them to be safe and you don't want them to go out as much, right? And so on and so forth, right? And that is, I think, really continuing to be a challenge. We see this kind of elevated stress in our staff life, which we really try to manage the best way we can. We can't make it to go away, right? But we try to make it better. In terms of our customers, right? We are not doing as good as our full year, let's say, forecast, but we are doing much better than what's our kind of forecast we did in March, right? When the COVID hit and they say, oh, okay, well, now what? We didn't need to do any layoffs, like we are still hiring pretty actively, right? So in this case, things are doing well. Our customers were impacted in a different ways. We have customers, let's say, from a travel industry, right? And some others which have been very significantly impacted in a negative way. We often work with them to see how we can help them to manage that, maybe sometimes reduce spend they have with Percona. We also have a number of companies, for example, from online and education technology, right, which had a huge, very rapid increase, especially during March, right? And we really help many of them to make sure they can manage the traffic spike they had to at that time.
Okay, thank you. No more questions. I have one, I would say, very personal question for you. Look, you describe it yourself as a little bit, I would say, tricky person. So you could be some kind of general Peter, but at the same time you could be angry, you could be, I would say, like a hit. You can hit people by a word. I know that, yes, I know that not the same, but probably similar story was with Linus Torvalds. In some point in time, it was known that he was a very, very unpleasant person in emails about the Linux. Actually, when people trying to do some kind of, I would say, not good things, do some mistakes, he never choose the right words to explain. Actually, the words fuck, it's just a very, very good word. And in some point in time, Linus mentioned, okay guys, I'm sorry for that. I would like to change. So, what do you think? Should Peter change? Or you just accepting yourself and saying, okay, it's me, I'm not going to change, and things like that?
Oh, you're enjoying poking that bear, aren't you? Okay. Well, look, right. My take is this, right? Is they're acknowledging the current state of a problem, right? That does not mean what there is not a work remains, right? In this case, to be done. Like in my opinion, is hey, you know, I know that's who I am right now, right? That doesn't mean I don't want to be better in my communication style, right? And make sure what my interactions with people are productive for all of us, right? That doesn't necessarily, means always, comfortable, right? But at least we want to make sure that is productive, right? And I have actually done a lot of things to manage and manage that, right? I do ask people to provide me feedback, especially in terms of my management team, right, where things have been, not great, because frankly, I'm much better with machines than with people, right? I mean, that's what many engineers, may attest to that, right? I know, for example, I am not very good remembering, right, or noticing when people need to be thanked for, right? I tend to be maybe more negative, but I ask explicitly people, say, you know what, please, from my management team especially, hey, please tell me who needs to be thanked and for what, because you know what, I'm not just feeling that. And then they tell me, and I do those things, right, to right. So yeah, this is just like some small example. But my attitude is not, hey, you know what, I'm an ass. I will always be the ass, and there is nothing I'm going to do about that. Just deal with that, right? I don't think that would be very helpful.
Okay, thank you very much. We received a lot of clear and direct answers for the tricky and not simple questions. I really appreciate your time and would like to say thank you.
Thank you, Peter. That was
okay. Well,
very
you're welcome.
interesting,
That was a
informative
pleasure.
interview.
It was really quite interesting interview, and now we know Peter Zaitsev much better, and actually now we are really able to decide, is it really worth to work in Percona.
Yeah, that's completely out of topic, but when you ask the last question, like, Peter, you can hit the person by a word. And I imagine that, and we have this person in the studio. Please, come on, come here. That will be fun.
Thank you very much. It was quite interesting. I would say it was quite personal. Just perfect interview. Peter, thank you very much. I hope you also enjoy it, and I would like to wish a good luck for you, Percona. Please hire as much perfect people that fits your culture, and I wish you a double growth and wish you and double revenue. Good luck, people. Peter.